Welcome back to the Wednesday night Bible study. We're in the story of David, the Old Testament. This is the 7th installment. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 24, and this one I call Revenge with a question mark. Revenge. Why the question mark? We'll find out. So last week, we saw that David, the national hero, giant killer of Goliath, he's been hunted by King Saul, and he's lost everything. He's pretty much hit rock bottom. He lost his position, he lost his home, his wife, his mentor Samuel, his friend Jonathan, and his dignity. And not for anything bad he had done. Saul was responsible. But finally there was good news. In 1 Samuel 22 we read, where David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him. So God gave David a safe haven, a place to retreat, a place to recuperate. God gathered David's family around him. He brought 400 men who began to look for David for leadership. So God in his divine plan was giving David a purpose and direction, and this was part of his plan. Today we're going to talk about revenge. Have you ever felt the urge to take revenge? Has someone ever done something against you? Imagine your persecutors, or those who are doing that against you, suffering as you have suffered. Imagine them having the same misery they've caused you. Maybe even that they ask for your help and you deny them the hand they never gave you. The word revenge sounds so bad or unpleasant. Instead of saying, I'm going to get you, we may use other words to make it seem okay. Like, I'm going to stand up for my rights. Or instead of revenge, we say, it's justified retaliation. Whatever we call it, God calls it revenge. Paul writes about how we should love one another in Romans 12, starting with verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. And do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Those were words from Paul. He quotes God himself. So one thing we can't control is how people act toward us. We can't make anyone live in peace with us, but we can do our best that we are always seeking peace with everyone. And part of that is for us to not take our own revenge. Leave it to God for that. God says that's his job. He's not saying don't defend yourselves. He's not saying it is wrong to seek justice through the legal system. It's a problem when we take the law into our own hands. Personal vendetta. There's a saying that there's nothing so sweet as revenge. Why do you think God commands us not to take our own revenge? Getting caught up in revenge can be anything but sweet. We can become angry. If we act on it, we can become vicious. So why all of this talk of revenge when David is our subject? Well, in continuing David's story, we come to the topic of revenge in 1 Samuel 24. I'm going to skip the verse-by-verse chapters in 22 and 23 and just give you an idea that those chapters center around King Saul's pursuit of David with the intention of killing him. Tragically, Saul kills innocents just because they helped David. There's a couple close calls, but David eludes Saul each time in those chapters. But we're about to read where David has an opportunity to take revenge against King Saul. Chapter 24 begins with Saul back on David's trail, just after Saul got sidetracked fighting the Philistines. So let's see what happens. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the desert of En-gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags of the wild goats. 3,000 chosen men. David has 400 misfits. Saul means business. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. So Saul had to go to the bathroom. A cave was a place for a little privacy. It turns out Saul was not alone. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, this is the men talking to David, this is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. So here we have King Saul is vulnerable, and the men see an opportunity. This is the perfect chance for David to get his revenge against the king. His men even give spiritual reasons to encourage David. They're saying the Lord arranged it, and it was okay for David to go for it. David could easily have killed Saul. He doesn't, but he can't completely give up this opportunity to get even. It's like he wants at least a bit of revenge, a taste of revenge. So he cuts off a corner of the king's robe. Well, right away, God pricks his conscience. God pricks his conscience. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed. Remember, the king, Saul, was the anointed king. So, I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. With these words, David rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. So David repents. Here's an example to watch out for even the little sins. Watch out for sins we often don't take seriously. They're still wrong. David tells his men to leave the vengeance to God. We'll next see that because David refused to get even, God blesses him. Let's look at verses 8 and 10, 8 through 10. Remember, David follows Saul to talk to him. Remember, he has the torn robe with him. He wants to prove his innocence and his integrity. So here we go. Then David went out to the cave and called out to Saul, my lord the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. So David begins by showing his respect to Saul the king. Next we hear David trying to set the record straight. He said to Saul, why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? And next David goes into a great detail how he has good intentions. This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master, because he is the Lord's anointed. Finally, David gives proof and tells how he will let God judge between them. Verse 11, see, my father, meaning Saul, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds. So my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead flea? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. Quite a speech. This was all very risky for David, don't you think? Saul could kill him right there, or have him killed or captured. But this is where we'll see God blesses him for not taking revenge. Verse 16, when David finishes saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me of the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me." When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. Wow. David's honest words have softened this tough-hearted Saul. Saul even admits here that David will someday be king. The king then makes a plea. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family. It was common in those days that the ruler of a new dynasty would murder the whole family of the old dynasty. A way to secure your position by removing any potential claimants to the throne. So that's why Saul is making this plea. So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So it'd be nice if King Saul never bothered David again. That won't be the case, I gotta warn you. But for now it looks like there is peace. This whole incident shows the truth in Proverbs 16. And that is, when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies live at peace with him. So I want to end with a couple of principles on the matter of revenge. Mistreatment from the other people is inevitable. There's always going to be others out there who will hurt us, try to hurt us. It's human nature. But what we can do is anticipate how we react. Acknowledging the urge to get even is not the same as retaliating. When we're aware of what's going on in our heads, we have time to feel, pray, think, and then choose the right course of action. And the right course of action is one that reflects our trust in God. Knowing that we as humans have the temptation for revenge, we can still refuse to act on it. We can make up our minds ahead of time to leave things in God's hands. We're not responsible for how others behave, but we are responsible for making sure that we're not mistreating others in return. That's something to think about. And this is where we'll end today. And I want you all to be safe, take care, and may the Lord be with you.